In your marketing and when you're dealing with customers, sometimes you have to look at the hidden side. Why are they acting certain ways that you might not realize at first? Well, joining me right now in the Marketing Sherpa Media Center at Email Summit is Stephen J. Dubner, the author of Freakonomics, a man who has studied the hidden side of everything. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So first I want to talk about something that we as email marketers feel a little uncomfortable talking about, and that's scam and spam. But I think we can learn something because as marketers, we don't just need to capture emails, we don't just need to get people to be interested in our company, we need them to get through a long process to eventually want to buy from us. So keeping that in mind, and I'm not saying anyone should scam or spam, what can we learn from Nigerian spammers?
Right, so we looked at a study that this guy who's a security, basically he works at Microsoft Research, and he's a researcher who wants to make communication as frictionless as possible. So if you can imagine, the less spam, the better. But he was tickled by this puzzle, which is everybody knows about those Nigerian email scams. You know, I'm dear sir / madam, I got your name from a list of blah, blah, blah. You know, it's incredibly impersonal, it's full of typos, it's full of crazy claims. I am the former oil minister of the western portion of Nigeria, and I have $20 million. I need to get it out of the country, and I need some help doing it because they've got me, under watch. And if you will just, help me, you'll get a big cut. And so the question that this researcher, Cormac Hurley, his name is, asked is, if everybody knows about the Nigerian scam, why do Nigerian scammers still say they're from Nigeria? In other words, why hasn't that email evolved into something different? Now there are others, but still that one is still used. And so he looked at this problem, looked at this puzzle, and his answer was that actually that's just the way they want it. That they're actually, while that might seem dumb to us, that's actually a super smart kind of dumb, because what they're doing is they want to sort of sift out for anyone who might naturally be kind of gullible or with it, they want to sort out for anyone who might be savvy to it, who might say, well, that's plainly a scam. They're trying to find the people who are most gullible generally. And one way to test for that is to see if they don't think that this scam email is a scam email, then maybe they can be developed and cultured and ultimately, give them a whole bunch of money. So the idea is, how can you come up with ways to sort people into the groups that you want to sort them into? Sometimes you do it in a kind of reverse way. You do it by saying, rather than saying, hey, we want to recruit for the smartest people, you kind of, bury a bunch of Easter eggs somewhere to let you find the people you're looking for without them even knowing that you're looking for them. And you're right, it can be really expensive, costly in all kinds of ways, financially but other ways, to get people involved and to get them engaged in a bunch of transactions if it doesn't come to fruition, if you don't end up making money from it. So nobody has time for that ultimately.
Yeah, and I think there's a great lesson there. Again, it's not to look for the gullible people, but to me the lesson is sometimes as email marketers, when we're capturing email addresses, we're putting a big incentive there, right? And that's what they're interested in, the incentive, and they're not interested in our product. Or we feel like we have to put a squeeze page or lead form in front of everything, so we'll capture all these email addresses and have all these leads, but we really haven't captured people who are interested in our value and the value at the end that we're trying to...
I mean, there's two big things I would encourage people to think about. One is, what is the value of the content, whatever the content is? Let's say in this case it's email addresses. What's the value of the content you're capturing? So if I get 1,000 email addresses via a certain platform or mechanism or ask, have I done a good job of assessing how valuable those are in the long run versus a different set of 1,000 emails, okay? So that's baseline one. But baseline two is this. What's a lot harder to think about, and what I find that people in business rarely think about, or at least far too seldom, is when you're looking at a population of customers, let's say, or if you're in politics, of voters that are engaged, it's very natural to focus on them, right? You've got them, they're in front of you, you can learn about them and so on. What we don't do a very good job doing generally is thinking about the population or the part of the population that you haven't captured at all. And what is it about your message or your product that is not appealing to them? And that, I think, is huge untapped potential. So if you're, we tell a story in Think Like a Freak about a philanthropy called Smile Train, where they ended up getting donations, about $1 billion in donations over 15 years. So they're plainly very successful. But they realized that a lot of people who gave to them represented one kind of giver, which is the kind of natural do-gooder who really wanted to be engaged with the charity so much that they were willing to get like 15 or 20 pieces of mail a year from them after they signed up to give. And they thought, well, Sure, that's great. That's great that we have those, tens or hundreds of thousands of people. But what about all the other people out there who might want to give to us, who might want to join us in our mission, but who don't really want to get married to us, who don't want to get all that mail? What if they just want a one-night stand, just write a check and be done? So they offered them what they called a once and done option, which in philanthropy, as in marketing, in sales, this is so heretical, because we all know that it's so expensive to acquire a customer or a donor, and then once you have them, you kind of try to own them for life and milk them. I mean, I don't mean to put it pejoratively.
Yeah, sure.
And they were saying exactly the opposite, which is, we don't want to form a lifelong relationship with you. We just want you to give once. And they experimented a lot, which is something that firms don't do often enough as well. I know that your people try to experiment a lot. And they ended up offering this once and done option, and they found that not only did people give very frequently once they were given the once and done option, but they gave more money than the typical asks, and the vast majority of the people who responded to this once and done option didn't ultimately opt out and say, don't contact me anymore. In other words, these were people who wanted to join the party, whether it's a customer or a donor, but they wanted to be, they were not getting the message that the main message was appealing to. And that's what you have to do, is kind of realize that anytime you're selling anything, buying anything, promoting anything, you have to think about your population as being very, very heterogeneous. Everybody doesn't think like you. You might come up with an incentive that you think is brilliant, that offers something that you think is important. A lot of people couldn't give a crap about the incentive that you think is important. And it's really important to try to identify and appeal to the heterogeneous components of a population.
Yeah, that's been a hot topic here at Email Summit, segmentation. So for example, from our research, even we saw when we asked customers how often they want to receive email, 86% said at least monthly, but 15% said daily. So it's kind of the same thing. If you don't segment, you're either underserving or over-serving part of your population.
Yeah, the other part about that is, look, survey data can be really, really valuable, but I feel it's a really valuable component of the data that you really want to get, because survey data can represent what people say because that's what they feel at the moment, whereas it doesn't represent what their actual behavior will be. Survey data can represent what they feel you want to hear from them, because, I mean, if you think about it, there's what you could call a cooperator bias. Like, anybody who takes your survey to start with is already cooperating with you. So they're kind of wanting to wanting to present themselves as on your side. So it's very possible that they're going to overstate their actual intentions.
Absolutely, and one thing we're teaching here is take that qualitative data and then get some quantitative results.
Right.
Do some A/B testing, do some experimentation, and I know something you talk about, which is so difficult for us as marketers, admit what you don't know. So how can you advise marketers who really, to get paid to know everything, to walk into a room and say, I don't know this about the customer, I want to experiment, I want to learn?
I love that question, because that goes to the core of a lot of what we do with Freakonomics, which is, get the data. First and foremost, really think about the question you're trying to ask. It's very easy to ask the typical questions, how can we do more with less, all those questions. But try really hard to get to come up with the question that really answers, that really gets you to where you want to go. And then try to get good data. Now, in marketing, look, you guys, I won't say invented, but A/B testing is such a valuable tool. It's so basic, it's so easy, it's fun, it's not expensive. It's a marvel that it's not used more in government and in corporate life generally, but in marketing it really is. And partly the digital revolution has made it so great and doable, right? The thing about admitting what you don't know is this. When you work at a firm or in government or even in your family, if you're a parent, most of us, when we think that when someone poses a question, we say, I don't know the answer to that. It shows that we're less competent than we think we should be. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people don't do experimentation, A/B testing, when they should, is they want to think of themselves as, or they want other people to think of themselves as the person who has all the answers already. And we just argue that, a big part of being really good at what you do is admitting all the time the limits of what you know, and then work really hard to find out. And, that's what fuels what I do as a writer, that's what fuels academia, that's what fuels good research, is if you already knew the answer, you wouldn't even have a job. Presumably, you wouldn't even have a job. So that's what I tell people is, turn your job, rather than trying to turn it into this model of all-knowing, all-seeing competence, like any problem that comes across my desk, I can immediately solve. That's just unrealistic. And what's much more valuable and realistic and fun is to say, that's a tough one. Let's surround it. Let's come up with the right question to ask of it, and then let's find a way to use experimentation to get data that shows us what's actually going on as opposed to what we're guessing is going on.
Actually, and that brings up just one last question. So it's good. I listened to one of your podcasts recently, and you talked about the jobs that can easily disappear because they can be automated or roboticized. And so really what you're talking about also is making you almost irreplaceable by automation, by really doing that higher level thinking.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of people who are very, very, very anxious about how technology is changing the labor markets, and understandably. I mean, look, if I open a restaurant today and I have a choice between hiring 5 wait staff at $10 or $15 an hour and 20 iPads at an upfront cost and then amortized and it becomes really cheap. That's a really scary thought. That's just one tiny, tiny low-level example. But it's true, any time that you can add value that only comes from the human brain, and believe me, AI, artificial intelligence, is growing and significant and I think incredibly helpful, but it's not going to put us all out of life or out of a job, because there's just too much about the way that humans interact that can't be mimicked by non-humans. I kind of wish it could. Sometimes you wish it could. The podcast that, I don't know when by the time people will see this it'll be out, but the podcast we're releasing tonight on Freakonomics Radio is actually about how advertisers and marketers are using the insights of behavioral economics and behavioral sciences to kind of better understand how people really behave. There's so much room there for improvement. I would argue that advertisers and marketers are generally much better than a lot of academics, government people in understanding how to craft a message that people really respond to. So for instance, we think that appealing to people's moral conscience is like a very, very powerful social message, an incentive, and the data show that it's not. The data show that people will nod and say, if you tell me I should use a lot less energy or whatever because it's good for us, it's good for future generations, and if you survey me on that, was that ad effective? Oh yeah, that made me really feel. And then if you go look at the data on how those people respond, that kind of messaging does not work very well, typically at least. So it's really key to understand the incentives that actually work by getting real data that show it. And right now, at least, we humans are a lot better than any kind of computer in coming up with a way to solve those problems.
Which goes back to the importance of testing and experimentation. Yeah. So, well, I'm Daniel Burstein, Director of Editorial Content at Marketing Sherpa, joined by Stephen Dubner at the Marketing Sherpa Media Center at Email Summit. Look forward to hearing what you have to say later today, and you can get a lot more lessons from Email Summit by tuning into the Marketing Sherpa blog all year long. We're not only bringing up thought leaders like Stephen Dubner, we're bringing up a lot of brand side marketers to share what they've learned over the year as well.